Welcome to Mom in Mind, where we dive into all aspects of perinatal mental health and wellness related to conception, pregnancy, birth, loss, postpartum, and new parenthood. We raise the volume on these topics in hopes that someday everyone will have the support and information that they deserve before they need it. Please note this podcast is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Mom in Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. And welcome to Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week and Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month. We are kicking off our leveling up of awareness by reviewing some of the myths of motherhood that many of us have been up against or are up against right now. And I want to specifically talk about how these myths impact our sense of self, our sense of ability, and our perspectives about ourselves and the world around us through the transition to motherhood, fatherhood, parenthood. I really experienced firsthand, and also know how these myths that have been, shuffled around either on social media or through the generations or whatever it is. I don't know who started it, but how these are impacting our mental well-being. After all, it seems to be that the myths that we hear end up being beliefs about ourselves, especially when they are not questioned, when there's no pushback on the myths. I think it's so important for us to be pushing back on our assumptions about what motherhood, parenthood, fatherhood is supposed to be like based on, who knows, things we've heard, things other people have told us. Because if we're not pushing back on those myths, they end up becoming beliefs, and those beliefs end up impacting how we think about ourselves and how we are functioning as new parents. So I want to give you the first one that I hear the most often. First, I'll tell you about the ramifications of the myth I hear the most. And that is, I'm failing or I'm a failure. Now, let's think about this for a second. How in the world would someone come to that conclusion if they hadn't been fed some sort of lie that they were supposed to be perfect or know what to do all the time? I actually think that one of the core and most prominent myths of parenthood and motherhood is that you should know what to do. That baby's going to come out, that baby's going to be healthy, you're going to be healthy, and everything is going to be awesome. And you're just going to get this download of knowledge that just sort of, comes through some magical portal in the universe. And then there you have everything you need to know to take care of yourself and this baby. I'm saying it in a ridiculous way because, frankly, I think it's ridiculous that we have this pressure, that myth is still alive. I'm really trying to push it down, that you need to be perfect and that you need to know what to do and that you're going to know what to do all of a sudden. The way I sort of think of it is like perfection and knowing what to do is like the trunk of the tree. And from there comes these branches of feeling like you should be happy, be fulfilled, be doing your life's purpose. Everything should come easy to you. You will have a picture-perfect pregnancy. Your birth will go really well. Your breastfeeding will be easy. You're going to be able to bond immediately. Feeding your baby is not going to be an issue. You're going to get pregnant right away. Any number of things spanning from trying to get pregnant to pregnancy to birth and to postpartum and afterwards. All the things that we talk about here on this podcast all the time. I want to cut down that tree. I want to really break it down because I see so often, and I know you guys feel it and see it and hear it yourself, when you really sit down and think about it, these pressures that are just constantly around us really, really impact how we see ourselves. You're going to be able to do everything and do it well all the time. The kind of super mom myth that you can do everything by yourself, that you don't need help. Somewhere along the line, we lost our villages and whatnot. And so maybe we've just come to think that we're supposed to do it by ourselves because who's showing up? The people who maybe used to show up in culture, who used to bring by food or whatnot, just randomly aren't there as often. Sure, certainly that happens still in some circles. And right now I'm primarily talking about the U.S. There are quite a few cultures that have very supportive practices that I think we could learn a lot from and maybe try and adopt in some way to support ourselves and our process and our children. So let's break it down a little bit. What happens when something isn't going as you expected. We're talking to some level about the expectations about how things are going to go and the difference between the reality and what actually happens for us in our particular situation with our partners or our family members. So what happens? Let's sort of start at the beginning. Where do we learn these ideas? It's hard to know for sure, but some of them come from our hopes that are maybe we really do have, and sure, absolutely have hopes that you're going to get pregnant on the first try, or that it's going to be relatively easy to become pregnant, that it's going to be relatively easy to stay pregnant, because the idea is that, and the hope is that if you get pregnant, you are going to have a baby. So let's start there. Where does that begin? In this day and age, it could be in our social media. We're seeing images of perfect motherhood, perfect parenthood, perfect fatherhood. So there's the images in our culture, but there's, also things, just passing comments that people make. And I think people have really good intentions, but sometimes they pass along what seem to be supportive statements, but for the person who may be having a hard time or the person who's just getting into the journey, kind of sets them up with expectations of things that may or may not happen. For instance, maybe even before somebody gets pregnant or is considering having a baby, they may hear things like, oh, you're going to be such a good mom. I can tell everything's going to go really well for you, or those sorts of things. So setting up expectations. And again, it's not inherently bad, but I want to think about the nuance of things that gets into our mind that helps create the idea and the picture of how things are going to be for us. Again, I will say that, yeah, we do want everything to be like that. We do want it to go well. And absolutely, I hope that for you. Absolutely. We do know that at least 20% of women and at least 10% of men and partners do have a hard time, a clinically significant hard time. So I don't want to diminish for the folks who do, have a very easy time. That's awesome. But here on the podcast, we're really those people have a voice, and we're trying to give a voice to those who are suffering in silence. And maybe not suffering in silence, but still suffering nonetheless. Those comments that people make to us, those come with a certain amount of pressure, whether it's registering for us or not, that we are going to be able to get pregnant easily and keep a pregnancy. What happens when that doesn't happen? When we don't get pregnant easily, when we have multiple miscarriages, when there is a stillbirth, when there is a neonatal loss. A lot of people are feeling extremely upset, maybe traumatized by their situation. And a lot of people also come back to feeling like they did something wrong, that they did something to cause this. Now, this is what I mean, those myths, how those myths translate into how we think and feel about ourselves. This is the mental health and wellness part of it. So I want to push back, on these myths for this reason, because we have these ideas that we are going to feel just fine. Things are going to go really well. And again, I hope they do. But when they don't, what do? We blame ourselves. I just don't think that's fair. And maybe you agree. Maybe you agree hearing this that you don't think it's fair either. But there it is. There's that pressure on ourselves. I should have known better. I shouldn't have had that drink. I shouldn't have gone on that run. I shouldn't have stayed up too late. I should have taken that prenatal vitamin. Any number of those things, we often are taking it on as our own fault. So skipping ahead a little bit to birth. What are our ideas about birth? What are the romantic ideas and the myths that we have about birth? That you are going to know what to do. This is what your body was meant for. This is what your body is designed for. I'll include nursing in this too. I hear that a lot. And again, that's not necessarily a myth, but yes, your body is built to do these things. But along with that myth comes the pressure that nothing bad is going to happen. And then at the end of the day, if things do happen, then we go back to that self-judgment. It's our fault. I did something wrong. Even when there's been issues with other people in the picture, let's say healthcare providers who have, done something wrong or were not supportive, I still hear people come back to themselves, well, I should have pushed harder for X, Y, or Z, or I shouldn't have let them say that to me. A lot of the myths, I think, come back to this self-judgment place. So sometimes, myth busted, sometimes labor is very difficult. Sometimes birth does not go how we want it to go and can be devastating. And what I would hate is for there to be an addition of insult to injury when people are already having a hard time and trying to figure out what just happened or how to heal from it. And then on top of that, feeling bad about themselves and judging themselves. Oh, it's so devastating already. And then to feel bad about it. So myth busted. Yes, labor is not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be the picture that you have in your mind. And as I said, we can say the same thing for nursing and breastfeeding. There are so many systems in our body happening at the same time, including the interplay with our own histories, our current physiological functioning, the environment around us that plays into how our pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goes, and nursing goes. Again, but what I hear is a lot of people saying I'm a failure because I can't breastfeed. There's an enormous amount of pressure right now to be exclusively breastfeeding or to breastfeed for a certain amount of time. I have moms who are really, really stuck on a certain amount of time, whether it's 6 months or a year, that they have to be doing something and their body is either not working the way they expected it to or want it to. They can't find or afford the kind of support that they would need to have an easier time of breastfeeding. Or they're just in general feeling the pressure like they're not doing something correctly. Then there are moms who are having a perinatal mood or anxiety issue, like feeling anxious, like feeling depressed, like feeling manic, like experiencing psychosis or trauma. I mean, this is definitely not something that you expect or want to be going through. And I will say that depression and anxiety and all of those things themselves, they change how your brain works. And it changes the way your thoughts think. So they tend to be more negative and more self-judgmental. It's harder to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's harder to imagine that things will change and get better. So imagine, then you're already dealing with these myths of, you're supposed to be happy and you're supposed to be fulfilled and you're supposed to be connected to your baby and breastfeeding's supposed to be easy. There's already the myths there that you're struggling against. And then this harsh reality of depression and anxiety and stress and struggle is laying on top of that and pretty much amplifying those negative things that we think about ourselves. It's all my fault. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing the right thing. Questioning ourselves all the time. Again, if you come back to that idea that these myths that we carry around that are sort of invisible until you're up against them end up being the beliefs that we carry. And it's possible truth. And it's also possible that somewhere along the line you encountered really challenging things in your life that amplified any of these myths, these fantasies, these romantic ideas about what this perinatal period of time is going to be like. And those beliefs can be really hard to change if we're not questioning them, if we're not pushing back on them. And I think that's really what Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week is all about, and what Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month is all about. I hear so often from people who don't know much about perinatal mental health. Once I tell them a little bit about it, it's like the light bulb goes off. Oh my gosh, my so-and-so went through this. Oh my gosh, I dealt with this and I didn't even know. And oh my gosh, if I had only known this stuff, how much better would I have been? I think what we're doing here with the Awareness Week and the Awareness Month is really pushing up against those myths and holding up a mirror to them and questioning them and saying to ourselves, is this stuff we have to believe? Are these things true? Do these myths, do these pressures support me or hurt me? And collectively, can we push back on them? Can we all raise our voices to say, you know what? No, this is not okay. I am not subscribing to these myths. I'm going to say right now, I don't have to be perfect, and that's okay. I'm chopping down that tree trunk of perfection. I don't have to be perfect. I'm okay just the way that I am. And by the way, just side note, in parentheses, quotes, whatever, perfection is not real. So, we can just throw that out anyways. There's no such thing. But as soon as we start chopping away at this, what happens? All that shade gives way to light. We're able to see better. We don't feel the weight of shame. We don't feel the weight of judgment. We don't feel the weight of embarrassment. We don't feel the weight of I should. The feelings of failure start to lift and turn into something else. Again, we're not looking to be perfect. That doesn't need to happen. I don't want that. I don't think you want that. I mean, in reality, I'm a perfectionist, by the way, and I don't want to be perfect. It's a big old pain. So maybe we're looking at some balance. Maybe we're looking at having hope that things go well. Obviously, yes, you want to remain somewhat optimistic, but optimism in the sense of the myths, it turns into fantasy. And that's where we get into trouble a little bit. We can prepare, we can temper these myths with being prepared, with planning, with knowing the realities of what can happen to us, and realizing that the myths that are out there are, on some level just making us feel worse, making us feel bad. It's not you. I think that's at the core of this. Whenever we start to feel like I'm a failure, what's wrong with me? Why can't I? We feel like it's us. We end up blaming ourselves. But I want to tell you, it's not because of who you are. It's because things are happening because of what you're going through. And that is very different. So when you're encountering these myths that getting pregnant is going to be easy, that the transition to motherhood and parenthood is going to be smooth sailing, that breastfeeding is going to come naturally and birth is going to come naturally because that's what your body's supposed to do, that your baby will be able to sleep perfectly through the night, that they're going to feed well and you're going to produce all the milk in the world, that you're going to be fulfilled by this role. That's what you were meant to do. That's why you're on this earth. When you start feeling those things, again, it's about balance. Yes, hope for what you want to hope for. But if that's not happening, if those things aren't happening, and think in perspective of you, if you are the person who's getting pregnant or birthing or delivering or nursing, if you are the support person or partner or husband or grandparent or friend or coworker of the person who's going through something, before we say something to ourselves or to somebody that we care about, we have to think, am I reinforcing a myth that is going to potentially make them feel worse? Or am I offering them support in the way that's best for them? It's something to consider. I really feel that one key to supporting parents and mothers through maternal mental health issues is helping to address these myths, helping to bring them out into the light, helping people to see that, no, it's not just you. It's not in your head. You've been given a lot of information through your life that has set you up to have potentially unrealistic expectations. And if things don't go well, it's not your fault. There is a way through this. We can find help. We can get better. We can get to those points where we feel like, grateful and thankful and healed and recovered. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you think are some of the myths? What are things you've heard about what it's supposed to be like? What your life is supposed to be like? What your baby is supposed to be like? What your partnership is supposed to be like? There are tons and tons and tons out there. I'd love to have you share your voice with us and tell us what you think. You can come and join us on the Mom and Mind Connection Facebook group where we can talk about this. You can help spread the word about Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week and Month by sharing this episode from our Facebook page, Instagram, or Twitter, and come and join the conversation. Let's raise all of our voices together and break down these myths so that we can all breathe easy. And whether or not things are going well, we can all feel the support of each other and know that we are in this together. So please do stay connected. Help us move the line forward for maternal mental health. There are some really amazing organizations out there doing fantastic work this week and this month. I will have links to those in the show notes. And I thank you so much for being with us today. Until next time. Thank you for joining us today. Please share this podcast. Together, we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Come connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at Mom and Mind.